Turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Greetings once again, all you happily howling handsome hound dogs and all you perfectly pleasant pretty kitties. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech, and no, you are not seeing doubles. There really are identical twin Micromatic turntables on the bench. What you see on the right is from the Magnavox. One S is in Sierra, C is in Charlie 603 transistorized coffee table unit that I just showcased in video 1. In fact, over here we have the power supply and amp chassis removed, and I'll be getting into this again in just a moment. So let's pan on over once again. So as you can see, yes, things are going to start getting real. I'm going to be working on all this at the same time, and I have some stuff on the other bench as well, especially from this unit here. This turntable is from the vacuum tube Magnavox, of which I have disassembled, working on the amp section, the receiver section, power supply section, all that. So there's a lot going on in this regard. There's always a lot going on around here. But anyways, I really want to dig into these record changers, turntables, whatever, and start going to town. So like I said, it's getting real. The children are running and screaming and fleeing for their lives. The hound dogs are howling and running. The kitty cats are all up the trees. So let's go ahead and get to it. What I'm going to start with is getting everything cleaned up. You probably can't see the detail that I could see, but there's a lot of dirt, you know, debris, fuzz, all that stuff, cobwebs, all tucked away in the crevices. And I like to go through, you know, with my little vacuum hose and various attachments and just get everything, you know, vacuumed out thoroughly before I start disassembly. And also too, what I'm going to do, not that it's a big deal, but I'll just point it out for some of you detail-oriented people. You can see here that, like, this label here, this tag is starting to peel up. This part already kind of broke off here. So I'm going to get everything glued back down to the chassis and make sure that I get these labels and tags protected, not only for originality or historical sake, but you know, also too because of the data that they contain on them. So, you know, I like to protect everything, keep everything as original as possible, and I'll just clean around it. I'll work around everything like I always do. I never, you know, damage labels when I'm cleaning out a chassis. Even when I'm using solvents and everything, I'll go ahead and, you know, take care of all that, mask off what I have to, cover everything over with plastic, if it even gets to that point. Usually I don't have to even do that. I'm just careful when I'm maneuvering through. So anyways, I'm going to do that. Once everything's all cleaned out, then I'll start the disassembly of both subplates. Like I said, these are identical units, so I'll go ahead and get these subplates disassembled, the various levers, gears, and so forth, cams, whatever, good enough so that I can gain access to what I need to gain access to in order to, of course, get everything cleaned out thoroughly and re-lubricated. I'm not going to do that part on camera, but I will come back when things are disassembled and just kind of show you, yeah, take a look. This is what's going on here, and of course show you everything after it's cleaned and re-lubricated and whatnot. So I'm going to go into some details, but I'll spare you the really, you know, I think kind of boring stuff if you were watching me just going through and cleaning little parts, pieces, and levers. If some of you are into that and you want to see that down the road, let me know, but I'll spare you that, and I'll just kind of show you the end result and various stages of disassembly, reassembly, of course. So anyways, let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so all of the labels under the turntable chassis here that remain have been glued down, and before I get into disassembly, as I mentioned, I want to talk about the muting switches on these turntables, what they do, and that's one of the first things that I'm going to be disconnecting the wiring from is these muting switches before I end up pulling off these subplates here and getting down and dirty into the mechanism. So let me go ahead and zoom in over here to this muting switch that I have pulled before I get the wires from the tone arm desoldered from the switch here. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, zoom in, and we'll talk about the muting switch real quick. Okay, so first off, here's the muting switch that's obviously mounted to the subplate. And what this muting switch essentially is for is to prevent the listener from hearing mechanical noise, vibrations, and all that when the tone arm is cycling. And you know, a record's dropping and all that, there's vibrations and bumps and all that are occurring that could be picked up by the amplifier section. So in essence, what happens is when the tone arm is just in its normal play position, in other words, and when it's not cycling, there's a section here that you can see that is, you see this little strip here of phenolic that's attached to these contacts. Just this little strip of phenolic board here that's separated from the rest of the board here. Okay, well, you might be able to tell that it's lifted. Now, when it's in that lifted position, then the signal can pass from the the cartridge to the amplifier. So what causes these contacts to remain in that lifted position is this switch lever here, okay? Now this switch lever here has kind of a bend to it. It kind of pivots, if you will, underneath this this portion of the muting switch here, this bracket, okay? It kind of pivots underneath it, and it does so on account of the movement of this tone arm lift assembly here, these levers. Okay, and let me kind of demonstrate by I'm going to grab this here and just kind of manipulate this tone arm lift lever here, this assembly. But you see the contacts dropping, okay, disengaging, or excuse me, engaging, then disengaging, okay, engaging, disengaging. Now when they're disengaged like that, obviously the signal can pass. When the contacts are engaged, what happens is the signal is shunted on through to ground. So and let me just kind of briefly demonstrate that. Okay, so we have here the muting switch that I have removed from the other turntable chassis, obviously. And what I have going on here is I have a signal coming in from my generator in place of what would be feeding into the muting switch via the cartridge, the tone arm, all that. So, and then I have all appropriate grounding taking place. The signal is leaving the muting switch via this RCA, and I'm picking it up with this signal probe and my little signal tracer test amp here. Let me just quickly zoom in on the muting switch a little closer. And as I explained a moment ago, on the intact muting switch that's still installed in the chassis, I pointed out the switch lever that comes in from underneath and lifts this strip of phenolic, hence breaks these contacts here. And as you can see, the contacts are engaged. That's why we don't have any sound, because the signal is being shunted to ground. Hence, I explained how that muting switch works and why that is and what the desired result is. So if I go ahead and just lift up on this phenolic strip as the lever would normally do, and just break those contacts. Let me go ahead and do that. Then we have our signal. Okay, as simple as that. And that's normally what is taking place when the tone arm and whatnot is in play position down on the vinyl. That lever is pivoted upwards and is breaking these contacts. And again, when the cycling happens and the tone arm reaches the end and lifts up and cycles and drops another record and all that, then the contacts engage so that you don't hear the mechanical noise and all that, as I explained earlier. It's important that these contacts are very clean. In fact, when I was setting up this little demo here, when the contacts were actually engaged, I was still hearing the signal faintly in the background, and it was kind of coming in and out a little bit, and I was hearing some crackling as well because the contacts were very, very dirty. In fact, when I cleaned them with a little strip and some alcohol and just went underneath and was cleaning the contacts, the little strip that I was cleaning them with came out really black. And I'm not even done cleaning those contacts, but later on I'll go ahead and take care of that. But just for the demonstration, I wanted to get them clean enough so that I could demonstrate what's going on here. So keep those contacts very clean. If not, you're going to have problems with the muting switch doing what it's supposed to be doing, and you're going to hear even noise and crackle and all that garbage. So there you have it. Okay, and lastly, before moving forward here, let's go ahead and discuss one more thing briefly regarding these muting switches. Now, if there's an issue with the contacts breaking and engaging and so forth, then you need to check the gap between the contacts. And you can see here I have a 3/1000 of an inch filler gauge. You can use a piece of paper, that's even fine, and go ahead and slip that between the contact points on each side and make sure you have adequate clearance. And you can see here that everything's looking good there. If you had an issue with clearance and so forth, you might want to check the bend on this switch lever, because remember I told you it does have an upward bend and it kind of pivots up and down underneath this section of the bracket under the control of the tone arm lift levers here. So it's possible that this could have been bent in one direction or the other from its factory position. So you might want to experiment with that and make sure that this is bent properly, this switch lever, because if not, if it's bent too far one way or the other, then that could certainly affect your gap here between your contacts. So check that out if you have a problem there. Okay, so as you can see, I'm elbows deep in the disassembly of these turntables. I have both subplate assemblies pulled, and I'm going to talk about their functions the best that I can. I say the best that I can because, of course, with these assemblies being pulled from the turntables, function testing is obviously limited. I can't go through and demonstrate the full functionality of these units, but what I can do is I go through and perform more disassembly. I get further into disassembly and, of course, cleaning and relubrication. I'll talk about the various mechanisms, how they interact and work together, what lever does what. And I'm not going to go into real super critical detail, but you'll get the gist of what I'm talking about, which is why, for example, I reinstalled the tone arm on this tone arm swivel base here, so that I can kind of show you how the cam works, the primary role of this main cam gear, and how it works to cycle everything. So that's that. Now, before I dive into that, though, I will just briefly point out how these subplate assemblies were removed from the chassis, and it's pretty straightforward. But let me go ahead and zoom in on what's referred to as the platter spigot housing. Okay, you see these 3 screws here. Well, I put them back in the holes just to keep track of them, but this housing here obviously is installed from the let me pan up here. This mechanism is obviously installed from the underside of the chassis there, so this housing mounts up over here, okay? And those 3 screw holes line up here, here, and here, okay? And then, let me go ahead and zoom on over to the tone arm swivel base. And you have these 2 screws here, which again I have in place just to keep track of them. And from under the chassis, this swivel base here, okay, extends on through this main knockout here, and then the 2 screws just drop into these holes, okay? And once you have those total of 5 screws removed from this housing and this base, then the subplate assembly just drops out, okay? And you'll need to manipulate it just a little bit, but you'll figure it out if you ever get into one of these. It's not that big of a deal, but it drops out for the most part. So there you have that. Now, let me go ahead and move forward, and I'll talk a little bit about the function that I just mentioned a moment ago. This tone arm lever here that makes up part of this tone arm clutch assembly has a cam follower pin that rides in these tracks, okay? And if you keep your eye on the tone arm, you can see the role that the main cam plays in cycling the tone arm, okay? And again, I can't demonstrate the full functionality of things, of course, but you'll get the you'll get the gist of what I'm talking about, okay? All right, so just a small example, and again, as I go through, I'll explain in a little bit more detail how the various mechanisms interact and whatnot. And actually, let me zoom into this one because I want to talk about, again, just how filthy these are, which is the reason why these mechanisms are being pulled out, everything's being disassembled, cleaned, and re-lubricated in the first place. You may not be able to see the amount of detail that I can, but everything is so filthy. There's a lot of accumulation. You can see the surface rust and oxidation, like on this pawl here, and this again. Here's the tone arm lever that I was pointing out just a moment ago, and you can see the surface rust and oxidation and all that. Any remnant of lubrication has, long gone away and probably flaked away, and what remains is completely degraded. So, after almost 60 years, that's to be expected. And that's why these units are a lot of work, because, in order to do the job right, and that's the key, to do it right, and to get these things working reliably, there's a lot involved. And I've only touched the surface. As you can see, there's a lot of there's a lot of mechanisms all throughout, kind of sandwiched, beneath these, beneath the various levers and all that. When I start peeling back the layers and all that, and getting all these levers out of here, and again cleaned up and relubricated where needed, then, you know, again, it comes down to a lot of work, a lot of time to do it right. So that's what I'm diving into now. So let me go ahead and talk on a few other topics involving the servicing of these turntables. Okay, so I just briefly want to touch on these drive wheels and idler wheels here and what happens over time. A lot of you know that rubber doesn't do well with age. These drive wheels aren't too bad. They're still pretty elastic, okay, for the most part. I think I can get away with using these. Not too bad. Okay, they still have some elasticity to them. Both of them, actually. So I'm going to kind of recondition the rubber on those with some rubber rejuvenator, just kind of see how the rubber responds to that. Worst case scenario, if it looks like they're not going to respond real well, then I will send them in to have new rubber put on them. And the idler wheels, however, are pretty much shot. You can probably hear how hard that rubber is, as opposed to the drive wheels. They still have that kind of rubbery thud to them. And this has turned into just almost like brittle plastic. So it doesn't have any elasticity anymore. And as such, the surface, the gripping surface starts to get kind of slick. And it's just a matter of time before, you know, they start cracking even more. I can see some hairline cracks that probably don't show up on the camera, but I can see little hairline cracks around the edges. And eventually this material will start to break away and all that jazz. This idler wheel over here for this unit is not as bad. There's still some elasticity to it, but if I bend it, yeah, you can see it's cracking around the edges. So these idler wheels need to be sent away to receive new rubber. So that's going to have to be done. Something else to be aware of for you younger cats or newer cats that are kind of getting into working on this gear. So there you have it. Okay, so next thing is removing the motors from these chassis, and all that involves is these three clips here. Just remove them and then lift the motor off the three standoffs. There's these two wires here, the black and the red here, black and red, that extend through this hole to the top side, and the black wire terminates at a on-off switch, and the red wire is going to have to be clipped because that terminates into a plastic connector. So again, it just needs to be clipped, and then during reassembly I'll resplice that, solder it, pull some heat shrink tubing over it, and we're all good there. So let me go ahead and pan on over to this switch on the top side of the other unit. Same thing. And let me zoom in just a bit here, a little bit more on the switch. Okay. And this black wire here is the black wire that's coming from the motor, okay? This one here. And it terminates along with this yellow wire to this side of the switch onto this terminal. So I just need to desolder the yellow and black wire here, and then again clip the red wire, and you know, go ahead and splice that all together later. And that's really all I need to do there. And then the motor will lift out freely. You know, both motors, I'm going to do that. And then let me go ahead and actually pan back out. And as I said, in the next video, because this is going to be a you know, a multi-part series, obviously there's a lot of work to be done. So in the next video, I'm going to be going into details concerning the cleaning and relubrication of all of these mechanisms, you know, the motors as well. Once I have everything pulled off these chassis, that's what I'm going to be doing, and again, going into detail there. And also too, Once these chassis are free of the motors, and again, they're already free of these mechanisms, then that's going to give me an opportunity to go through and really clean up these chassis, because they are very, very dirty, especially this one over here on the top side of this chassis. It's really, really bad. So I'm going to get these chassis all cleaned up, because of course, once I get these mechanisms all cleaned up and ready to reinstall, I want to reinstall them onto clean chassis. So there you have it. So stay tuned.
This is a poor man's shoe production.